they're not going to get this unless they're shoved into it. And that is the heart. That is the fucking heart of entrepreneurship. Being shoved into it.
But there's that way where you can actually, as a consultative, passionate person about what it is that you do, you can find a way to sort of be that trusted advisor.
It's the reps, and the more things you do, the more you'll be able to start to filter those out. What's worthwhile, what's not.
I have this thing that I built, and I'm going to this event with VCs.
Because, speed beats perfect planning every time.
Hello, sir.
What's shaking, Kyle?
How you doing?
How you doing?
Good. Good to see you.
I'm good.
Amazing.
Same.
How's your Friday?
My Friday is great, man. It's a badass day so far.
Good. Amazing. Well, I love just by the way, just jumping into stuff. I don't know. I've always sort of not liked the okay, are you ready? Are we ready? I'm gonna push it in just a minute, and then we're gonna go. You know what I mean? So we're in it. We're in it.
Let's talk about that. I'll save a story for that for the show.
I want to hear it.
Oh, I thought we'd record it. It's great. It might be great content.
We're recording now. Let's do it.
Great. That's awesome. No, I guested on a show because I take a lot of guests on my show too, right? But then I guested on a show, and to your point about let's just go. I've been doing that a lot. Rather than just being like, hey, how's it going or whatever. Like us, it's like we're just jumping right into it, and that's where we start the conversations. It's awesome.
It's so natural too, by the way, when you're like, hey, nice to see you.
I know.
Isn't it? Literally the first second.
For sure, brother. For sure. No, I don't remember the name. It was a very sweet woman. Yeah. And I kept saying, she's like, okay, well, let's go through the questions. I'm like, cool. So we're recording. She's like, no, we're going to do the pre-interview and then we're going to record the show. I'm like, what the fuck?
That becomes a great show where you just put the pre-interview in and then you're like, all right, now let's try that again.
Dude, the pre-interview, I probably said 87 times. That's an exaggeration, but no less than a dozen times. Realistically, it's like, yeah, I think we're ready. Let's just go into it. See, this is great content. Right, no. Like, well, you might be able to do that, but I can't. I need to know where this is going to go and where, every step and where it's going to end. I'm like,
nope,
okay.
Sorry. We're just having the conversation. I'm not.
Exactly. Yep. Everyone, like, are you ready? You ready? That was an hour and a half, bro.
Rick, you know what? Let's go ahead. Are you ready for you're ready. We'll do it now.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Rick, so good to see you.
So good to see you too. It's like we haven't been talking for 5 minutes.
Exactly. Well, literally, this is the first time we're getting to see each other. So nice to physically meet you, not just voice. So
yeah, right on, brother.
I've been looking forward to this.
Hey, man.
It's interesting when I go back and I look at what you've done, what you do. I'm thinking, I was going to say enterprise, but I want to say ecosystem. Is like, I feel like you.
Yeah, it could be that way. Yeah,
you're an ecosystem. And so I'm super interested to hear, you've got now, if you back all the way up, a little bit, if you're good to share sort of, a little bit of sort of growing up and what got you to the place where you sort of, whether you came through traditional career job 9 to 5 or not.
Yeah.
And then when that entrepreneurial sort of switch flipped.
Yeah, you got it, man. I was reading the other day, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, which by the way is still like my favorite publication ever. Yeah, I felt super intelligent and intellectual when I would stay at places, for conferences, and they were held at these 5 stars, and they drop off the physical paper. I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago.
In the lobby or in a very sort of visual place in a nice hotel with a fresh cup of coffee and a crisp Wall Street Journal.
You got it, dude.
And I will be half reading and also half looking around to see who's looking at me.
That's awesome. Yes. I just felt so great. I think it was a Waldorf, when I first got it delivered to my door. I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. What do I need to do now? And then that was the same. Like, I think I need to go to the lobby.
Put some slippers on and then go to the lobby.
Yes, right on. I was probably like 24, 25 years old, something like that. I'm like, I'm going to be smart today. Let's go into this. Yeah, but the article I was reading, because I have a subscription now, totally digital. And the article I was reading was about degrees. And this relates to your question about growing up and going into the entrepreneurial journey and the foundations beyond that. And it was about college degrees, this article on how things have totally shifted. And, because what used to be the thing for like the boomer generation, as it's so called, was
Hmm.
you could go to school, you could get a degree. And this was so well laid out. That's why I like the journal, man, because it for the most part, it's completely unbiased.
Right.
Absolutely. No real political leaning whatsoever. It's just, let's just take a real honest look at some kind of topic. And they were looking back, and there were things that I didn't even know or grasp the concepts of. Yeah, and I grasp things pretty quickly. It's like today there's degrees and there's a lot of vocations like entrepreneurialism and all that that don't require anything. And I still think that the only place really for degrees today is having to do with things that you would absolutely like surgeon, right? I had major surgery 9 years ago, saved my life, gangrenous gallbladder, all that. I'm so grateful that my surgeon had an education.
So there are places with such complexity, and the density of by which you will learn the best is
Yeah.
gonna be in those places of higher education. I think what's interesting is that is things like business administration, or marketing or advertising or the
Yeah.
other things that have sort of disintermediated in lots of different ways, though,
No
is
doubt.
different.
No doubt, especially tech, which is a field I'm in. I mean, even as you bring it to today, to AI, it was about a decade ago. I was sitting on an advisory board for a vocational school around Chicago that I don't think exists anymore. It was ITT Tech, and I
Oh, I
was,
remember. Yeah, totally.
yeah, I mean, they were big. They were really, really
Hmm.
big. And I was so flustered as they were talking about curriculum, with me and the advisory board. I'm like, you guys are moving too slow. I'm like, I'm in the
Yeah.
field right now. By the time anyone even completes the 2-year program, it's completely outdated.
Yeah.
So it has
In
to be a com
2001, try and go to
yeah,
college and learn wireframing.
yeah, right on. Exactly. Yep. Right on. So looking back and the perspective on this as it was explaining, the thing that kind of blew my mind was that back then, 30, 40 years ago, the whole thing about going to college was so you could come out of it and make an income that was higher than the majority of people in America.
Right.
There was a big gap between income levels between those who had a college degree and those who did not.
Yeah.
And that was a true distinction between what the old school white collar, blue collar was. With that, I pondered on that a bit. I'm like, that makes more sense,
Hmm.
because today it's almost like, especially in my field, right, in cybersecurity and tech, if I see somebody with a degree and I see they have zero experience, and they're expecting a $120,000 job like it was 34 years ago, it's like, no, you need
Totally.
the application. You're coming in here with totally green. You
Yeah.
have some theory that's about it. And by the way, the theory that a lot of people teach that you started again 2 years ago, if it's a vocational program, or 4 years ago in a normal university, that's outdated, man. Because
I
you've had no way to apply it.
Totally. And I had someone, one of my first, let's say my second job, I set up the interactive division. I missed that word interactive. We don't use
That's
it
a
much
great
anymore.
word. Yeah.
I know.
I
The
don't miss the
interactive
word pivot.
division at like at an agency, and I was hiring one of my first PMs, and they had come from a prestigious school and had 2 masters, and was telling me all about the curriculum and the masters
Yeah.
and all these sort of things, and wanted, and was asking for a pretty decent salary. And at the time, it's in 2005 or 6, but I just said, like, what you said sounds great. I was like, you have you met with Kellogg's? Have you taken a project for Sprint through to completion?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
have you dealt with how hard it is to deal with XYZ type client? Like, and expectations and process. And like, you can take all those books and throw them out the window.
Yeah. Right.
Most all of this, especially from a project management perspective, is around experience and gut and people. It's the number of times that I've led projects for Google and Spotify, and the number of times I've used Scrum, like
Yeah.
actually used Scrum,
Yep.
almost zero.
You get that. Bingo.
You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah. Oh,
just,
yeah.
and so I think it's one of those things that we have come away from the resume, and while the resume has changed, right? Now it's like 2 years is fine. It used to be like 2 years, you're just a job hopper. And then now it's also, just show me that you can do it, or show me who you have done XYZ for, and then let's go try it together. It's just, I love how everything is sort of atomizing into
For sure. It's all
yeah,
experiential now. Right on, my man. And
Totally.
this will lead me into directly answering your question. But my daughter, freaking brilliant, right? She's been on this trek to head to Broadway musical theater for 5 years. She's 17 now, and my two other kids are also heavily involved in musical theater. She just auditioned for AMDA, one of the most prestigious musical theater colleges in New York, right? And I
Nice.
went into this a little skeptical, because I'm like, wait, you're going to go to school for this because she wants to. She was talking about NYU as well, maybe Juilliard, some of the more prestigious
Mm-hmm.
places, just like AMDA out there. And I'm like, but why can't we just like get you an agent? That was my thought, because I mean, you've got the talent, you've got the ability, there's no doubting that, you're getting leads all over the place in private companies. That's private theater companies around Chicago, which is the second city, right?
Yep.
There's none other better for musical theater than New York or Chicago. And seeing her abilities, and she's like, no, I want to do this because I still want to learn some more. I'm like, well, that's great. So, okay, let's go audition. And then as I'm sitting there, they're starting to talk about this. They're like, well, here's our program. It's 2 years long for musical theater in New York. Then you can go to LA if you want to, but that's more so for film. But for you, for musical theater, our first 3 semesters, so we're only talking a year and a half, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
our first 3 semesters are traditional. You're at school during the day, right? And then you've got your nights free, to do homework, whatever, work, all of that. And they said, but the last semester that's reversed. So you are going on auditions during the day,
Right.
5 to 20 auditions per week.
Nice.
And their entire faculty is a working faculty. So they're in the industry working in New York, in musical theater and Broadway productions. They said you go to auditions during the day, then you go to class at night and you talk about your auditions.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. I'm sold. I'm
Totally.
totally sold. That's application.
Yeah, I love it. And there's a woman that I saw recently who is starting a school that is using AI to teach the fundamentals and has had some amazing progress with the fact that basically you've got the kids learning using AI coaches on iPads and it's 2 hours a day learning the fundamentals like reading and math and those sort of things, and the rest of the time is like doing projects and making stuff and
Yeah.
and looking at and the kids are scoring so much higher and they're
Yeah.
doing really well because you also like you're not wasting what I feel like 6 hours a day just sort of slowly going through chapter by
Yeah.
chapter
Yeah.
and then like saying stuff and repeating it back and those sort of anyways, education, that's one that I can't wait until it sort of gets completely rewritten, and I'm
No
excited to
joke.
see what
I'm
my
with you.
boys go through.
Yeah.
So what was
Right
your
on.
so back to your
Yeah.
like what was your sort
Exactly.
of flip?
I'll circle this back to RadioShack when I was there, and I just
Nice.
recognized this
Oh,
year
I missed
too
that
because
store.
it's dude, I know, same. It was great. I love the shop there. I've always been into tech, but I always liked what tech could do rather than the tech itself, like the
Mm-hmm.
outcome that it would provide. Yeah, so when I went from working at McDonald's to RadioShack, and I quickly moved to an assistant manager. And so, because I do M&A, I've got a public cybersecurity company. I'm reading financial statements all day long, with quarterly filings, annual filings, all that. And everyone's like, how do you know all this stuff? And I'm like, well, I've just been in it a long time, but I traced it back to just this year. I'm like, holy hell, that job really set me up because their assistant manager program wasn't really just to give the manager a helping hand
Right.
at the stores. Their assistant manager program, the only reason it existed was to be able to groom you into being a manager, a store
Right.
manager. So when I was an assistant, I was in managerial training classes where they taught me how to read P&Ls and balance sheets
Yep.
and work on profitability of the stores, look at inventory levels, look at wage levels, labor dollars as a percentage of the total revenue of those stores to keep things in line. Because when you got promoted to a store manager, you had a base salary, but then your only incentive, the only bonus, only commission that you got, because as a salesperson, you got a shit ton of commission.
Yeah.
I made 30 grand as a 17-year-old during a December selling cell phones. I sold 300 cell phones and a $30,000 commission check at RadioShack.
Oh
Right?
my gosh. That's
Incredible.
awesome.
But as a manager, you don't get that. As a manager, your only incentive / bonus, and if you want to call it a commission, was based off of store profitability. That's it.
Mhm.
That is it. You got a percentage of the store profitability. So of course they invested in you and taught you how to read all these things and trained you on the job. Literally, you would go and sit in class where they would walk through this stuff. They went through other things like different leadership tactics and all of that, people things, but the financial side of it, the thing that actually made the company a success and you a success in managing that store, it was, here you go, as an assistant, we're training you. Now go back to your store and work on this with the manager at that
Yep.
store. And it was just this back and forth, this ping pong of in a seat in front of a desk, then back to applying it literally the next day. Yeah, and that's how ever since then, it's like that's been my life, man. Even
Yep.
moving into Geek Squad as the first Geek Squad agent in Chicago.
Nice.
Then writing the sales playbook for Best Buy for Business. Which then they eliminated that division. That's when I started really kind of on my own. But I always had this thing. I was always trying to spin some stuff up. Things that I always wanted recurring revenue, bro.
Mhm.
Seriously, even though I absolutely love and I still love it, we sign the big deals and we get funded up front for some things on this. It's like, great, we just landed $1 million deal. Or like one of my salespeople yesterday, just closed a $250,000 deal.
Amazing.
And it's like, it is amazing. And you love those huge rushes. But then I take a look back at trying to manage and scale the business. I'm like, I love recurring revenue because it's exactly what you can fall back to.
Silent growth, just like daily or weekly, you go, that's all right, great.
Yeah, right on. Exactly. But now I'm trying to shift it a little bit too. It's like, well, recurring revenue, what if we can make the big deals recurring? To where even though they might be one-time sales, but how do you fill the pipeline to that perspective to where it's like clockwork every week, every 2 days, every day, to where this continues to come back? And I think some industries have very much figured that out, especially things like the gaming industry. It's incredible because they're buying tokens, whether it's on Microsoft or Minecraft currency or whatever it is, every single day to continue to advance the game. And that's not recurring revenue, dude. But you can still look at it as that because you can still forecast that depending on other metrics. But
Totally.
RadioShack all the way. Taught me that stuff. And sales, I always say, was taught at McDonald's to me. And do you want fries with that? The upsell.
That's so funny. You and I have such similar. I started the day I turned 15. I started at Chick-fil-A. The owner lived down the street from me, and I came in. I got my uniform, and it was all crisp. It was kind of like it's got like all the seams on it. It's real stiff, but like I'm feeling pretty good. And they taught me the register. And within about an hour, I was like, "Cool." I was like, "Can I do drive-through?" And they were like, "Well, can you do some front count, like get just do the front counter for a couple of months and sort of get used to it." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I got the register thing, but the headset, like that looks cool." And they were like, "Just okay."
I want that look.
And like later on that day, that the drive-through person was like, "Oh my gosh, I just like I'm so done with this." And I was like, "I'll take it." And so later that day, the manager comes up and I'm like, "Yep, that sounds good." I was like, "I got the times down," and I'm just like getting it. And I did that for a year, and around late 16, early 17, the owner of the store quit, and I was the only one that really knew how to do everything. And so I was like, I don't know if it was legal and stuff, but like I was like hiring and I'm like, "No, you go home, you get out of here." And I was like, you know what I mean?
Well, you were
Like,
wearing the headset, right? Like, this is my source of
exactly.
power right here. Yeah.
But it was so different. I think and that's the way I learned too, is you couldn't have done like P&L for me in a book and I reply back, I do it back on a test. The real life gray, squishy, fungible, like, of a store, of a living, breathing organism, of the employees that some are not great and one's a troublemaker. And I mean, all those things, it's so different in the real world. And that's what, like, for me, I really want to teach my boys is I was talking to my son the other day. I was like, he was asking me about money and jobs and those sort of things. I was like, "Oh, no, we can get you a business and you can incorporate and you can have your business. What do you want to do?" And and the more we have this conversation and his mind expands, you do not need to wait until you're 18, until you're out of school, until you're whatever. Like literally just let's go set up William LLC right now. And he starts going, "You know what I could do? I could put the Legos that I don't use anymore. What if I gave them to kids that don't have Legos and maybe they want to buy them?" Like, and you start seeing those wheels turning and you're like, "Great, buddy, I want you to have 20 of those that have either made it or have not made it by the time you get to 18. And then that has been your education."
Right on. Dude, I absolutely love that. It's the same reason I bring my kids around with what I'm doing every day. On my show, my son has been editing the podcast. It's a top 2% global show, and he's been editing it for 3 years in Adobe Premiere Pro. I started, of course, with a professional outside editors, branding agency and all that. But then it was like COVID hit and I was like, well, I'm not going to be traveling to Seattle anymore. I was literally there like at the epicenter when it all went down. I was like, okay, we need to hurry up with our filming today. This was, in 2020, because I don't know if I'm going to get a flight out. When everything
Yeah.
was shutting down. It was so weird, man. But yeah, ever since then, I mean, he's been editing the show, learning how to do it, but it's throwing it in. So now he's thinking, it's like, well, maybe I want to be a film producer. Maybe I want to be a director. And it's like, cool. How about I go make a movie? I'll go make a documentary about the lockdown, and he came with,
That's
on the
amazing.
site, downtown San Francisco. It's like zombie apocalypse, no humans, no cars. And we're standing there in the middle of the city. And then we go back up. It's like, we're hungry. Let's go get a burger. And it was like curbside delivery to pick it up was literally, we walked up to the door to open the door to pick up our burger that we ordered over the phone. Like, no, you have to go stand on the curb. This is in San Francisco. But these experienced, dude, that you just like your son, right? With William LLC, they're not going to get this unless they're shoved into it. And that is the heart. That is the fucking heart of entrepreneurship, being shoved into it.
Yeah, just do it, and it doesn't matter. It's okay if it
Yeah.
fails. If your first 10 businesses, if they don't make it, it's great. Guess what? You have come out a fundamentally different person, and you know what will work, and you'll also have the resiliency to always think, oh, I could go do that. And I think, anyways, I don't even really think about people always, oh, where's I thought of college and this, that. I have no idea. And I'm not even
Yeah.
really worried about it, because I think one, education is going to be so different in 10 years, for him. But then also, I mean, take what we're doing now. I just interviewed Ben Huffman's, who founded Contra, and Contra's got 800,000 people on it now, and it's basically, you can, go sell out your services as a
Yep.
whatever, and make up your own
Right.
business, and so that's, I think, I'm really excited about future work. But like, so with,
Right
you
on.
take your Radio Shack and Best
Yeah.
Buy and Geek Squad, and then what was the like? When did that little earworm, that little idea, that little spark sort of set, where you went, I think I'm gonna set up my own thing?
Yeah, man. I had done like some web hosting stuff, and I figured out like that was fully saturated already, back during like the dot-com boom. Like
Cobalt. I used to sell Cobalt rack
did
servers.
you really?
I did, and I made healthy commission on Cobalt rack
That's awesome.
servers. Like,
That's so cool. Yeah. I was in a state because my twins were born. Yeah, and this was right when Best Buy eliminated this division too. It's a story I tell over and over again, where it's 2 weeks before my twins were born is when they started executing all these mass layoffs within Best Buy for Business. And they'd offer me, because I was at a regional level, they'd offer me to be an assistant manager in one of the retail stores. I'm like, that's not for me. I'm like, look at everything I've been doing the past several years. But then, at the time, it was like just feeling confidence, and like, this is the time. Like there is nothing else. It's like everything else is changing right here, and then at the time, talking with my wife, she's like, yeah, I think you should really do this. So she was a catalyst for that too. Yeah. And pushing me into that, and then also I had a great client, who's still a client to this day and became a great friend and an investor in the company, owns 6 Buffalo Wild Wings franchises around here. I serviced him with Geek Squad. He's like, you're just like my mechanic. My mechanic opened his own shop. I remember him saying, it's like, you need to go out on your own and do this too. So it was like the combination of the environment around what was shaking down with my job, twins being born, the family shifting, push from a spouse, and also push from a customer that I'd worked with at the company before, was just, that was it. And I've noticed too in my life, like there's things of threes. Like when things happen in a period of threes, I pay attention.
yeah.
So when that happened in just a couple of days, and that, I'm like, yep, this is it right here.
And the first thing you did, I'm gonna guess,
Yeah.
is you bought a domain name.
Yeah, absolutely, I did. And this is a good point. Okay, this is a very good point. A good story here too, because speed beats perfect planning every time. So many get hung up on like the name, or the what the domain name should be. So I just started searching real quick. I'm like, I need a domain name, to have some kind of presence somewhere. And it's like, well, what am I going to name the company? I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to help businesses with their PCs. That was what I was jumping into. I'm like, well, I need to start tomorrow because I need some income. So you know what it is? businesspchup.com.
Amazing.
So it's just like, screw it. I'll rebrand at some point in time, which I did, about 3 years later, when I actually founded Reach Out Technology, which is, for that, there was a lot more thought and visionary stuff putting into it. Totally businesspchup.com was definitely, it's like, I'm just getting started. I need to put food on my table. I got 2 new kids that were born. Family of 2 went to 4 overnights, and I have no no money in my bank account, and foreclosure happening on the mortgage, all of that stuff. So it's like, I just need some sort of identity that people can latch onto.
Totally.
And what's better than just saying, hey, this is what I do in your name,
Yep.
you know?
Super straightforward.
Yep.
And the people who probably wanted it, who weren't used to, some of those people who weren't used to sort of doing that, or as used to websites and that process, something is super approachable and safe and
Yeah.
straightforward as that is perfect. I love that.
You got it, man. Another thing I learned during that time too, I'm like, I need people to be able to find me. So of course I'm going to
Yeah.
Starbucks. That was my office for a while, was just Starbucks back when totally. I was thinking about this the other day. I chase squirrels too. But back then at Starbucks, I mean, it used to be the case where you had, porcelain mugs and you can go in there and just drink your drip coffee or your latte. They put the whipped cream on top for a mocha.
Mhm.
It was brilliant. That was my absolute first office. But then I'm like, I need to be visual. People need to understand, like, when I'm pulling up, I'm pulling up to help them with their PCs at their business. So I'm like, okay, I loved orange just because I came from Geek Squad, right? Orange and black,
Mhm.
so I adopted that. Again, not rocket science. It was just like, I need something, so we're just
Yeah.
said, this is how we're just going to go because we've got to generate some revenue right now, got to generate some income. And I'm
But
like,
wait, in
okay,
this
I'm going to
period,
make sure I'm
well,
going to get,
I
yeah,
want to double click on this just so I know, because also we're getting into a period where you're gonna sort of have mobile visibility in cars and that sort of stuff. How, like, was it you got the domain, you started branding, you started helping people, you helped existing or past clients or family and friends, and then sort of
yeah.
started to grow out? And was it still just you when we got to sort of the van or the car or the sort of marketing presence?
Oh
Or is
yeah.
it still just primarily
Still
you
still
starting to
just
build
me,
a brand?
literally just
Okay,
me.
great.
Yeah. I might have used, like, some contractor field services things, if I needed to have a
Yeah.
big project or something, but still just me. And
Cool.
with the car, I'm like, "Okay, it's orange and everything," so I'm thinking it's like I had a Saturn Vue, a 2004 Saturn Vue I was driving around. It
Okay.
still looked great, it was only 3 years old, yeah. I'm like, "Okay, I can wrap this thing," yeah, and then put a logo on the side, but then I saw a 2008 Saturn Vue driving down the road, and it was orange. Yeah, it was this time period where GM was making orange vehicles. I'm like,
Right.
"That's it. Why would I spend like 5 grand, that I don't have when I see the vehicle there?" So I went to the wrap place, and he's like, "Well, yeah, if you just put the logo on the side and vinyl, we could do some stuff for like $700." So I
Oh,
went in,
yeah.
traded my 2004 Saturn Vue for the brand new 2008 Saturn Vue that was bright orange, and then a customer that I landed, because I don't remember all the ways that I generated, but it was just networking, man. That's really it.
Yeah.
I did some mailers, back before email lists were really that big. There was no social media to speak of. It was
Yeah.
just hardcore knocking on doors, mailing out flyers, doing some direct mail and all that, which produced some results as long as I was consistent with it. But I remember one customer who signed, still again with reach out to this day, where he signed the contract. He's like, saw me pull up in the truck, as they called it. I never saw a Saturn
Mhm.
Vue as a truck, but it's pulled up
Yeah.
in that. He's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, I saw the truck the other day too." He's like, You're all over. Like, I'm seeing your trucks, plural, all over the place. You just kind of like blew up." And in the back of my mind, I'm just like, "It's just me, bro. It's
Yeah.
just one car, and it is
You
just
didn't see
me." Yeah,
anything.
right on. Yeah. But one of the first things I did too, when I said like using contractors, is especially in a technical services company, I outsourced the menial day-to-day stuff from day
Yeah.
one, which means I
Yeah.
outsourced my help desk with business PC help. That way, no matter where it was, because I recognized right away, and this is so important that so many entrepreneurs forget. I don't care what industry you're in, is that it is impossible for you to be out selling, servicing your customers, and administrating the business all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you can divide your time, and put in more hours, or you can figure out how to scale right from the beginning. And the only way to do that is to section some of those things off. Maybe not all of
Right.
those portions, but if you lay out what you want your company to look like, as if you were 30 times your size,
Yeah.
where would you start to fill those things in? And one of the biggest ones was the day-to-day stuff, is if I can outsource the help desk. Sure, they're like, "Well, are those your people?" I'm like, "I have a partner." And even when it was just me, that literally I called
Yeah.
them a partner, because I'm like, "I have a partner that will work on all the tier 1 and tier 2 stuff, because I know that you need a response right away when something happens." And transparently, it's like right now the company is just me. but you're
Right.
investing in our relationship, and even confidently. Another customer said this the other day. He's like, 10 years ago, Rick, you came in here and you said, I can fix all this instantly. That's what you said. And he goes, and you did. Like you literally did. And I'm like, I know, but if I didn't have the backing of some of these structural and infrastructure things in place right away, which is also why to start out with, I charged more than most one-man band companies. Because going back to RadioShack, if I need to know my cost of goods sold, how much is it going to cost me to deliver these services? If it's me, I'm counting that. Like I'm counting me as an expense if I need to service my customers, which most entrepreneurs don't look at. They don't look at themselves as an expense to the company, and that's the only way to get out of your head, I believe, as an entrepreneur and look past it. It's something bigger than you, is if you start to look at yourself as an expense to your company.
Right. No, totally. And I think it's right. One of the things that I love doing is I do love doing the menial stuff, and like I want to be on the chats, and I want
Some of
like
it's
I want to
fun, for
watch
sure.
stuff.
Yep.
But I want to do it for a period where I've done it, I've been in it. But then when I can dump my brain into a Notion document or a Google Doc or Word doc or whatever it is, and then say here, and then I need to drop it and I need to sort of pivot to something else.
Totally with you.
But I love that. And what you were saying about partners and contractors, I also think it's, I think people get worried that they're going to start sort of having other people in the mix, and I'm developing a relationship with my client and they want to know, are you a big team or whatever. I love to be like, look, you're investing in, if you trust me and my expertise and my taste and my and my operational skills to be able to both pick and manage whoever behind the scenes, like that's what you're picking. So we're not going to get into, I remember, working at big consultancies, it's always sort of, I want to see the resumes, I want to see how long they've been there, and I want to, let's do all the trust stuff. Nope. Like that's not how I play the orchestra.
Bingo. Someone just gave me that analogy the other day. That was Steve Jobs, right? From one of the Jobs movies. Yeah, exactly. Like you play the instrument, I play the orchestra.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
I love it, man.
So when did it start to pivot though, when it was just you and you sort of had your contractor partner orchestra, when did it start to sort of pivot into other things or sort of growing?
Yeah, it shifted when I founded Reach Out, and that was moving myself into a different phase of life too. Because going from business PT help, where it was literally just me, founding Reach Out, and it was about 6 months into Reach Out where I hired my first employee, who actually was somebody I worked with at Geek Squad and Best Buy. And as I was promoted at Best Buy, Ryan is his name, I would always recommend him as my replacement. Whenever I would step up, I would bring him up with me, and train him on what I was doing. So already a great working relationship. I know a lot of people, they hire their friends right when they start the business too. But from the get-go, it was like here's the vision. It's like we're buddies and we can both do this really, really well. But there's a set direction that we're going to go on this, and it's to scale. It's to provide income for a lot of other people. Because I'm not looking at just us, because even in that conversation, it's like, you're an expense, I'm an expense. So if we're going to grow this and make some money, to where we both have a decent living wage, then we absolutely need to continue to look on this that way. But let's go after some customers that you worked with, customers that I worked with, so it was a lot of sales focused. And from the beginning, he always focused on the sales or the service aspect, and I would be on the sales aspect. Even though I would still be, crawling under desks, working on servers, all of that from the beginning. It really took about 3 years or so to where it was 2013. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let all my certifications expire. I'm just going to completely focus on growing and scaling now at this point, because I found out that still I knew I was really good at it. And going all the way back to Geek Squad, and even all the way back to McDonald's and Geek Squad, they were like, you're one of the 7 test stores, Rick. Why are your per ticket averages 3 times higher than the other 6?
Yeah.
And I would ask, did you ever work at McDonald's? Well, no. Have you ever been to McDonald's? Well, of course. Best Buy corporate, everybody's kind of large. So it's like you've had the quarter pounders, right? If you walk in there and like, can I order a quarter pounder or Big Mac? Even if it's a value meal, what do they ask you? Well, if you order the sandwich by itself, you want a Coke with that. You want fries with that. If you order the meal, do you want to supersize that? If you order a straight up supersized meal, I want a number 2 supersize with a Coke. they're still going to ask you, do you want an
And
apple pie?
the apple pie. That's it.
Yes.
That's right. Oh,
Yeah.
the apple pie. Yeah.
There
I
was
can
some
literally, I
place to
know
go.
that's what their whole thing is, but like I can literally in my mind, I can both the crunch and the texture and the
Oh, dude.
flavor of that apple
Yep.
pie as a kid was just like, I don't
And
know,
the
little
burning of
now,
your
like
tongue too,
9,
right?
10. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Because the
Yeah.
outside is like is sort of normal room temperature and the inside is made of molten lava. And so it's
Exactly.
really hard to like, yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
So I mean, even throughout the, sales, that's it, and that's how I try to still teach and coach sales too. And someone came, I can't remember who it was. I was coaching them, but they're like, I don't want to seem pushy on something like this. If I call once a day, twice a day, or it was oh, it's my barber. That's right. That was just this week with my haircut, my barber. Because I was talking to him, I'm like, you know what? I've been coming to you for 6 years, bro, and we talk business all the time. Been
Yeah.
coming to you for 6 years. I'm like, I sit over there in the seat waiting for your chair to become available for my appointments. And not once have I ever seen you offer product that you have on that shelf behind you. Not a single time. And I know I haven't been asked about that either. He's like, oh
Right.
man, I came from a store, a shop in the city because we're outside the city of Chicago in the suburbs. And that's why he's so good, because he worked as a barber in the city for so long. Yeah. But then he's like, yeah, every single time he's like, what they would do is they would walk up. He's like, as soon as they would finish cutting your hair, they would go grab 3 things of product and say, this is what I used on your hair today, and just ring them up. And he's like, and just leave you to say no. I said, bro, you know what that's called, right? And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I thought that was I'm like, that's called the assumptive sale, man. That's it. It's the assumptive sale. And
Right.
you leave the opportunity for the person to say no. I'm like, is that a little over the top? If they didn't say like, oh, do you want this? After it's there, it's like, well, they would ring them up for the haircut, and all of a sudden it's like $78, or whatever it is. And he's like, I don't want
All
to
they
do
want
that.
is 20% of the people to be like, all right, let's do it.
Exactly. It's exactly it. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, but there's so many dollars to be made. Those are high margin products. I'm like, because you're talking about growing and adding on another person. You've got somebody who's there already. And we're having the scaling conversation about a barber shop, and how he does a rev share model with them. And the existing person that's there, one of the other women who I see, it's a dude and a girl. I see her sometimes, and she's like, well, I'm scared, because if we add somebody else and they're going to take away from my clientele, which means I won't have so much. I'm like, dude, tell her to fucking sell product. I'm like, that is like the low hanging fruit. It's like, yeah,
Right.
but we don't seem push. I'm like, I think you're doing people a disservice if you're not telling them what you're using on their hair, because the way that you use that and the way that everyone's hair looks walking out of the shop is incredible. And everyone's like, how do I do that at home?
There's a difference though that I think one of the things I learned when, where I sold the Cobalt rack servers was Interland.
Oh, wow.
And which turned into web.com, but I was at Interland and I basically watched we had a football field sized sales force there, which when the .com boom bust, there were about 6 of us after that. But there was like just this entire like a floor of people, and it felt like boiler room, and everyone's watching numbers and all that sort of stuff. But I found my groove there, and all I did was I just relaxed though, and I would hear a dog in the background, and I would be like, "Is that a dog barking?" And this lady would be like, "Yes." And I'm like, "What kind of dog is it?" And all of a sudden, we're just talking about her dog.
Yeah.
And then when it comes back to the conversation about web hosting, it has flipped, and now it's like, "So what kind do you think I should get?" Like,
Yeah. Right on, dude.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so I think it's one of those also that is not sort of feeling I shouldn't be pushing this, but it's finding your own groove to personally, like, if this is what you're passionate about is your hair needs to look great, is like, okay, I'm gonna tell you this. Use whatever you want to.
Yeah.
But what I used was, and I'll tell you why, like, is find your own story to sort of get in and be passionate about it versus if you're passionate about it and you're also doing a service that you're like, I want you to look great. And I'm telling you, I've looked at this many products. I'm telling you why this one's the best or whatever it is. It's not pushy. What's pushy is if I just cut your hair and say, well, I hope you have a great weekend. By the way, buy this.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
is pushy.
Yeah, right
But
on.
there's that way where you can actually, as a consultative, passionate person about what it is that you do, you can find a way to sort of, be that trusted advisor, and flip it a little bit. So that's what I sort of found, earlier on, was it wasn't about sort of doing the script and hitting all the bullet points and like, I'm going to shut down your, whatever. What I found was that sort of like, friendly, trusted advisor. And it was stuff that because I was super excited about like
Totally.
websites and web hosting or
Right on,
whatever.
yeah.
So
I got excited about cell phones, and I told him that story too, like the $30,000 commission check. I'm like, "Dude, you know how I sold all that?" He's like, "At 17, you got 30 grand?" I'm like, "Yeah." Everybody who walked up to the RadioShack counter, because back then it was always like 3-year contracts. Yeah, and I remember packages, for like $50 a month, you got 30 daytime minutes and 300 night and weekend minutes to
oh my God. I
talk.
remember
You know,
counting those phones. And I mean
totally.
those minutes. And
Yep.
by the way, best phone. Well, okay, two best phones. The Nokia that fit in your little change pocket in your
Yep.
jeans.
Yep.
I had an orange one, and that's the only thing I've ever used that pocket for, is that little Nokia, and that was my favorite. And then the first Razor flip
Oh,
that
totally.
was like
Yep.
the metal one that was like so like thin.
Yeah.
Those are my two favorite cell phones ever.
Yep, absolutely, man, with you. But we would sell cell phones for a penny. I'd be like, if they were buying batteries, I'd be like, "You want a cell phone for a penny to go with that?" If they were buying AA batteries. But it was like literally every single customer who walked up, they could have been buying a TV, or some of them buying a resistor, a capacitor, RadioShack. "Do you want a cell phone to go with that 79-cent capacitor?"
Yeah.
They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Well, let me tell you what's going on here." It's like, "Do you have any needs for this?" And then consultative, it's like, I see you. It's like, wouldn't you want to know, that your spouse is safe, just for emergencies? And even in that, it's
Yeah.
like, my dad died 3 years ago when I was talking about that. It's like, my mom has a bag phone, right? And then went to a cell phone in her car at all times just for emergency purposes. And you know what? Just
Yeah.
had to use that once or twice. Yeah, it's like there's a real deal here, or you could
Yeah.
use it like I do, because I use mine all the time, right? I'm a teenager, I'm blazing trails. You can use it all, whatever you want, but whatever your needs are. Does that sound like it would fit? But they're like, "It's really only a penny?" But to my barber, I'm like, maybe baby steps, man. 'Cause it's like, why don't you take
Totally.
3 of your highest margin products, just maybe some of the paste, maybe a hairspray, maybe one
Do you
other
know?
thing, set it on the counter.
Totally, and set it out. Or I'll give
Yeah.
you a deal on this one, like, every, like, 3 weeks. Do you know what the penny makes me think of is, the CD club.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I did that.
Right?
Yes, you got
You
10
get
CDs for a
one
penny. Yeah.
free CD. Like, you
Yeah.
get one free CD, and you
Yep.
can get 3 more for a penny or for $1 or
Yep.
whatever, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, now I'm hooked." And, like
Yeah. Dude, I totally did that. I even I remember I was maybe 18. I think I got a collection notice for that CD club one time
Oh,
too.
yeah.
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 'Cause it's like, I
Oh, I
don't want this,
totally
but then it's like,
forgot, and they
how
kept
do I shut this off? How do I turn off the subscription?
Totally.
Yeah.
So what was like so then you started sort of you hired your first employee, and then what
Yeah.
was how did the next, like, what was that year like?
Yeah, it was a division of labor, but it was introducing him to all the customers being like, "This is your point of contact. Don't worry, I'm still around, of course, but we're going places." It was
Yeah.
totally unapologetic. It's like, I still want to be able to provide better service from you today than, 2 years ago, just like 2 years from now, I wanna be able to provide better service than today. And they
Yeah.
understood that, because when it was just a simple message, dude, it's gotta be simple, just like business PC help, right?
Yeah.
Simplify the message. And make sure that you're able to articulate the value in what you're talking about as well, and what you're servicing, what you're providing, your products. So anytime you scale, there is unrest. I mean, now that I acquire companies, it's like, I'm still learning. Straight up, I am still learning on the right messaging when we take over a customer list.
Right.
Because in this industry, and like a lot, it's like, as you said it as well, there's a lot of tie to that original individual. So, but at the same time, I see that we need to rip off the Band-Aid, but in that ripping off the Band-Aid, it's articulating the value, and then people will come right along with you. And it doesn't have to be complex. It's just, we want to be
Right.
able to provide more value to you 3 years from now than what we can currently provide today. And everything's great today, but this is how we continue down that good, positive route. So then
Amazing.
just kept selling, came up with better ways to package things, came up with other industry disrupting things. Back then it was like, again, recurring revenue. I loved hardware as a service because I hated having to resell things. I mean, in this industry, like any industry, it's like, we take these phones, right? This is an iPhone 16 Pro. I get a new one every single year, and it's just because sure, I'm in tech, whatever. But most
Yeah.
people get new phones every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And these phones aren't cheap, bro. This thing's like $1,600 for this model.
Yeah. But
Whether
I still get one about every 7.5 months. Like, I just
yeah,
can't,
exactly.
I
Right
just
on.
can't, not understand where we're going and where we're at. And let's
Yeah. But even for
that blows
businesses,
me.
it's like businesses, they have their computers, but then they're like, no, I'm gonna stretch this out 7, 8 years. I'm like, are you kidding? That thing in your pocket is the same price as that computer right there, and you're replacing this every 7
Right.
months. Like you're saying, like these things have a shelf life for reliability, and that's why we
Yeah.
need to replace it. So it's been 3 years, and that conversation was just stupid to me. Trying to resell this stuff every 3 years, like what if we put this on a subscription?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a so we came up with this concept. I shouldn't say we came up with it, but we adopted it and hit it hardcore. Hardware as a service. Like, sure, your
Hmm.
computers, yeah, $59 a month. That's it.
Right.
You're
So
signing a
just
deal.
outsource that part of your brain when you have to think about purchasing and setting
Yeah,
up and configuring, and then one goes out, one needs to be serviced, one needs to be swapped out, like all of that. You're basically saying, like, let me just take that on.
bingo. That's exactly it. They're
Yeah.
like, well, what if I want to own stuff? Like, why would you want to own an asset that is worth nothing at the end of 3 years? It's like, because we bring those back and we donate them, like to Salvation Army, to
Totally.
other nonprofits, because it's our equipment that we're renting.
Yep.
Because they would ask, like, what do you do with them? I'm like, we give them away because they're not
Right.
worth any monetary value at the end of 3 years. It's not even
Yeah.
an asset you can carry on your balance sheet. It's something that will increase the value of your company if you're looking to sell it. Like,
Right.
you own your data. You don't need to own the computer.
Yep. Totally. And all the hours that I imagine that people go through, you know what I mean? Even in and
Yeah.
around that, from setup to configuration to keeping it updated and
Yeah.
safe and all those pieces. When
It's
did you
removing
start, like,
barriers, man.
so this is your main core focus. This is what you've grown over the years. When did you also start to branch out? When I look at between, books and podcasts and like
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything else, was this because of and for the central business, or was it more, out to diversifying yourself, or, what was the moment and also the reasoning behind sort of becoming the ecosystem that you have now?
Yeah, there was 2 big reasons, and they happened really at the same time within a span of a couple months for each other, and that was 2015. I, I was very, very comfortable with the income that I was bringing home. It's called a lifestyle business, right? You're able to
Hmm.
fund all of your personal expenses, you're able to invest a little bit, you're able to make sure you're providing a good life for your family. All of that is a lifestyle business, able to take some trips that you want to, but there's nothing over the top. It's like, cool, we're comfortable. And that was the
Yeah.
toxic word, was comfortability too. But then I had two major things. I'm also a creative, right? I've been a musician forever, helped plant 3 churches around Chicago. I was always managing part of the business of the church and then also the front man for the band, right? I've done shows, with these super bands around Chicago, in front of 5,000 people. And it's just,
Wow.
I could have been a musician if I wanted to. Yeah, but I chose to be semi-pro because I also wanted to help people. And that's the whole reason I was ever involved in like the church scene. And also when they
Hmm.
wanted to bring me on staff, like, we're going to pay you 6 figures. I'm like, I don't want it. I want to still have my business over here, and I want to be, quite honestly, a little bit of a rebel because I don't want to be encumbered by the financials of the people that are donating to pay my salary for me to give them the best
Right.
life advice. To
Right.
where that's in my, I don't care what anybody tells you. It's like a pastor will always have that in mind. It's like, what's the current donations to the church, or a nonprofit, an executive director? It's like, we don't want to ruffle too many feathers because it's a natural human thing, because this is supporting the livelihood of this organization, if it's a nonprofit or a church or whatever.
Yeah.
So at least on smaller side churches, which is kind of where we started. So I'm like, I don't want to have that tie, because I want to be able to be authentic and real with people. So if they come to me and like, oh, you know what, if it was Pastor Rick, right? Pastor Rick, I lost my job and I just can't seem to find another job or whatever it is. And I'd be like, dude, Taco Bell's hiring down the street. You got kids to feed. Hurry up or they're going to go hire somebody else.
Right.
Maybe not that crass, but that's actually a bit I use when I did stand-up comedy on Broadway too. I did see it.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, you're
You're gonna have to have
jacked
power so
right
too,
now.
by the way,
Yeah.
because I want to hear all the lives. I want to hear,
I love it. But
mix
yes,
100 lives.
right on. So the 2015, that's when I stepped out of ministry, if you could call it that, because I was
Hmm.
bivocational, really. I was bivocational. And there was reasoning behind that, is because I kept seeing some similar patterns in church. I'm like, this isn't my form anymore. And so one, it was like the music was kind of cut off, my creative side. So it was like, well, I also speak. That's great because I would always fill in for pastors here and there. People would always lean in, get a lot out of whatever I was talking about. And also that same year is when I had my health issues with my gallbladder. Coming out of that, it was two big shifts in my life in the very
Yeah.
same year. And out of that, I'm like, well, I don't want to go back to that, because then I started reflecting because, 45-minute robotic surgery turned into 3.5 hours by hand, which with me almost not making it
Oh,
for a
wow.
gangrenous gallbladder. I'm like, well, that's it. It's like, even though I had no idea what was going on during the surgery, right? The 8
Mhm.
months prior was living hell because nobody could figure out what was wrong with me for 8 months
Wow.
until I ended up emergency in the hospital. And going through, I'm like, something can happen at any point. It was very real to me.
Yeah.
And it's not focusing on, it is totally not focusing on the possibility of death. It is focusing on the abundant life that I still have ahead of me and how I'm going to utilize that and have a purpose to fulfill with that. It's
Right.
like, then it's balls to the wall. It's like, I need
Yeah.
to be creative. Like, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to see what's available to me. Sky's the limit. I don't care how stupid it sounds.
Take
I'm going
chances.
exactly
Yeah.
right on.
Speed and take chances.
Bingo. So I joined a mastermind within my industry and I was there for a year. But this, I would always see this in any group is where they'd be like, hey, Rick, I think you should be the leader of the small group in this thing. I'm like, I don't want it, but okay. And the reason it's just because I could put two words together, beyond anybody else. Like cool. So I did that for a year. I'm like, this isn't serving me. It's great that everybody grew. What's my next step? And then I saw this thing because I'd been on so many stages already, man, playing in front of thousands of people. I was used to being in the spotlight, so to speak. And I loved seeing the emotional change in people, even though it was within a church setting, to a point to where they felt better about themselves and in a position to where, whether it was spiritual or not, more motivated to go and attack life, and just change something meaningful and do something meaningful with their life. And that's what I love seeing. It's intoxicating for me, man. So
Yeah.
I found this dude. I was walking and I just saw these banners. His name's Clint Arthur, and he does media training, right? He still has this thing called Guaranteed Celebrity that he does to this day. He's now a great friend of mine. And you pay to be a part of this thing. He does media training for TV, and then he puts you on TV. He allows you to pitch producers. It's like speed pitching for 2 days. 2 days of training, 2 days of speed pitching. And I get on like 6 out of 12 shows in the first one. The second one I do with him, I get on all 12 out of 12 shows, invited to be on TV. The first time
That's
I was
amazing.
pretty pissed at myself, bro. I'm like, only 6, and it was like, yeah, he's like, that's pretty good. That's 50%. I'm like, yeah, but I'm noticing like this, like it was humbling too. I'm like, I've been speaking for so long, but I saw it like on stage and being a performer. I'm like, this is a different skill set, translating this into this setting in front of a camera, and I
Right.
had to bridge that in my mind, which I did, over courses of time and experience. Now I've done almost 300 TV appearances. I'm on nationwide TV. But the very first speaking event I did also with this program, which I will say this to the day that I die, I just talked at the Sport Philanthropy Conference, on speaking for success, right? I'm like, where you start, I am a full advocate of paying to speak. Because when you
Right.
first start out, you will not be sought out. You will not be offered $25,000 to come and do a keynote. What you need to
Right.
do is you need to pay to be on that stage because there's an ROI involved in something like that.
And get your reps.
Bingo, exactly. The very first event I did was an entrepreneur event with him. I paid like $2,500 to do it. My face went on the Jumbotron in Times Square, the NASDAQ Jumbotron. I spoke in the NASDAQ boardroom, which they gave, a video of your talk and photos, of you, professional photos. You're in front of the Jumbotron. I mean, imagine like the branding and marketing with this, right?
Totally.
But then 3 years later, dude, because that was 2018, 3 years later, somebody that I met at another group that I was a part of was interested in doing Regulation A public offerings and getting into that, a business funding specialist,
Mhm.
and he started looking around. So the phone call with me, he called me and he's like, I've been looking at 3 different people, and I think that you're the one that I want to do this with. Have you ever thought about going public? And I'm like, nope, never have. And he's like, well, what would you do with the money? I said, well, that's easy. I'd use it to acquire other companies because I want to scale this. And, I had the plan already. He's like, perfect. I knew this was right. But the thing that took me over the edge, dude, is as I Googled you, because I had started my podcast 2 years earlier in 2019, started getting a social presence out there. He's like, the first photo that came up was you talking in the NASDAQ boardroom. And I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, what was that about? I'm like, well, I told him it's like it was a pay to speak event. It was in front of entrepreneurs. I did get business out of it. That was the ROI, the immediate ROI. Where it
Yeah.
was paying to be there on that stage in front of other entrepreneurs in so many industries. But then that was the moment where it was balls to the wall. Was in
Yeah.
2018. After I gathered some information, I'm like, I'm just going to go out. And then I started saying, whatever comes my way, I'm just going to say yes to. Because if I've never
Totally.
experienced it before, I'm just going to do it. If it
Yeah.
sucks, it sucks. And I'll never do it again. If it's great, cool. Maybe 3 years later, somebody will find a photo of me speaking in the NASDAQ boardroom and say, hey, you want to go public?
Totally.
I love those. I mean, that it's so similar to how when I started building Stacklist, I started in
Yeah.
April, and then we sort of turned it on in August, and I went to New York, and I was following Darren Marble, who is the host of Going Public, funny enough, and runs issuance.com. And I saw he was running an event, and I have zero network at this point because I just I'd focused on family and everything forever. And I saw he was like, I'm gonna run a VC event in New York. And so I reached out and I got on the list. And all of a sudden I'm just I have this thing that I built and I'm going to this like event with VCs. And I DM'd him on X and was like, hey, do you have a list of who's coming? And he's like, well, actually I'm looking for sponsors. I was like, I'll sponsor it. And all of a sudden I find myself like a week later in New York, and he's like, everyone here, everyone, let's calm down. Just say, let's have our only sponsor for this event,
I love that.
Kyle
Our
Perlman,
only
talk about his company for a bit. And of course, my eyes are like saucers, and I'm like,
Yeah, he froze a bit, huh?
well,
Yeah.
I built a thing. Let me just tell you the story really quick, but from that has
Yeah.
just been like, the people I met and I think if you go back to that moment, you could probably ask people, should I do this? Should I spend X amount of money to sponsor an event in New York for a thing I launched on a domain like last week? People would probably, no, I don't, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I
right.
just love that. Like, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to see what comes from it, and I'm okay not knowing the outcome.
Yep.
But like listening to your gut and just activating as many of those things as you can.
Oh,
I
you
love
said it,
that
brother.
approach.
It's the reps, and the more things you do, the more you'll be able to start to filter those out. What's worthwhile, what's not. But you just don't know when you start out. It's impossible, no matter what anybody tells you, because different industries, and even better yet, and this also came from Clint. Same thing, because I was looking at something that was very similar to someone else, in a different industry starting, and I'm like, but he's like, you need to do this and this and this. I'm like, but that's just like them. He's like, you don't get it. He's like, the difference is you. You are a different person, and it will be different just because of that it's you.
Totally.
And I like bucking I'm going through this right now with our pitch deck. It's the sort of
Yeah.
thing that like if you try and do it exactly like all of the ones that have come before or whatever, my whole thing is, yes, you might not hit the science of keeping the attention of someone who only likes to look at things for 26 seconds. But I guess I'm also not that interested in you coming on if you know what I mean? And I'm going to do it a little different. And I think for me, it's one of those that I'm not too worried about the investor who only will look at my deck for 26 seconds because I didn't do it like XYZ sort of format. What I'm interested in is the person who's sort of a switch flips and goes,
Yeah.
I see what it could be. I see where it could go. And you've done this a bit different. I want to know more. Tell me the story. Tell me
Yep.
what's behind this.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh my gosh, but yeah, I love that. I love your,
Find the
just
curious people
thinking
that-
different
yeah.
and doing the different approach.
I also
all
like
day
being the
long.
first one to do things, which is another reason why I went public, just because it was that nobody in my industry has ever done that. As an MSP, a managed service provider, and there's one that was acquired. It was called All Covered. They were acquired by Xerox, or Konica Minolta. I can't remember but like that's great. Those printer companies wanted to get into the services industry, so they just acquired an asset. It
Right.
was an exit event for the owner. But then it's like there has not been one that has gone from inception to startup, or inception and startup to going public, except us, except Reach Out. It's
That's
like,
amazing.
and I couldn't understand why either, man. Because I remember when this took place, I almost felt like I was in a line, like 100,000 people on both sides. All the owners of all these MSPs, and I'm like, really, nobody's going to do this? once
Yeah.
I started discovering like the availability of capital and the greater potential returns and the exponential scaling that's possible with the public markets, what I didn't realize is like the bear that it can be from a
Yeah.
compliance perspective and how long it takes even after you reverse merge. Like we're just finishing that up now over a year later
Wow.
with all the filings, so it's like now we're going to hit full steam ahead next year, in the middle of doing acquisition. It's like it has. I mean, 2024, it's like going into 2025, those first 3 days, January 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's WTF, and that's so it's like I'm going to use those 3 days to reflect on 2024. you know,
Totally.
and then know that that's not going to be the way it is because I've done the heavy lifting now,
Yeah.
but still it's like, these eyes, and I've been told that from billion-dollar companies, like a lot of people are watching you to see how this goes, I'm like, well, it goes like what I've told every company going public goes. It's not a fairy tale. It's a
Right.
lot of hard ass work. It's a lot of your face out there. And you've got people who are long-term supporters, that believe in things, but then there's also people who will literally say, fuck you on these
Yeah.
forums, just depending on the stock price and other things that are totally out of your control as a founder. And it's,
Right.
but you work with them. And then that's the thing. It's like, there's also one thing I've learned. It's like, I've always known. Wow.
Yeah. You've known this.
I've known this, yes. I've said something the other day. I'm like, I woke up. I was like, what the hell is that?
I know. I woke up at noon.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes stuff comes out of your mouth. You're like, wow, that's great. It's like out of all these founders, out of all these owners, it's like the resilience is just not there with so many. And I think the thing that can breed resilience, because it's like I've heard this in speaking events when I've done like live coaching. I'm on stage doing a keynote, and it's like, let's take some questions, and it becomes live coaching in those moments, which I love doing on the spot.
Right.
But without fail, almost every event, it's always like, it's just so hard. I get up in the morning, I have difficulties trying to push through, because of all the things that I'm facing, and like, how do you get over that? And I'm like, well, you behave in opposition to that. That's the first thing. But I said, resilience, the thing that breeds resilience is curiosity. So if you can grow
Totally.
curiosity, it is difficult to farm resilience within yourself, I find, unless you're curious. So
Yeah.
even if it's bad things, it's like, well, if that really, really bad thing happens, it's like, how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to solve that problem? What does that mean for everything? And it's a curiosity around it. And everything almost becomes a little bit gamified in those moments.
Yes.
And then it's like, which is good for me because I like to win. It's
Yeah.
that's the
And I
thing. It's like,
games.
cool, that bad shit happened. I'm gonna win that shit too.
Totally. And I think also not being so worried about like the outcomes, the curiosity as an insulator to not being worried. I have no idea like where it's been an amazing ride so far of
Yeah.
everything we've done. But we're also early, but I have no idea where it's going, and that's all. I love it. Like
Yeah,
that's
right on.
great. And I'm, and I know that I am even over the past 8 months, I am a fundamentally different person. And what I've learned to do and what I've learned to sort of build and grow, myself is, and which I love it. And so I just,
Yeah.
I do love the journey, process of it. And I think it does help when you come up against challenging times. But yeah, you're right, that curiosity and being okay with, not stewing in something, but really wondering and being curious about what the next step and where it's going to take you is.
You got it.
Can really help.
I love it. I love looking around the world, man.
Here's what I love. I love Radio Shack to Geek Squad to Best Buy to Public. That is an amazing journey, and I seriously want to do a follow-up of this at some point.
Yeah, man.
Where we do. I want to hear the other lives, and hear music and stand up and all the other pieces. I feel like you and I have similar. We'll swap tales of I did improv. And took classes at UCB
cool.
and Groundlings, and was a waiter as an extra in a Robert Redford movie where the camera was following me when he was dancing with Helen Mirren, and I love all those. We'll have to swap all the stories. So
I love it, man.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This is so
Thanks for
great,
having
and
me, dude.
I love exploring all the your past and where you built everything, and So I think, yeah, once we get into the new year, I'd love to circle back and we'll do a
Let's
part
do it. I'm in.